Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today from SpaceBuds, the dispensary, is Dakota Licea. Dakota, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Patty.
So this is really neat. This is the second time you've been on the podcast. The first time I had made a comment on a local news outlet or whatnot on Facebook, and you absolutely annihilated my comment. And I was kind of in a weird mood, and I had just kind of started the podcast. And so my reaction was, you know what? I think that I'm going to have more in common with you than I'm not. And I think we should just become friends instead of arguing and being divisive. Let's become friends. You can come on my podcast. I'll do the episode called The Youth Vote. And I got to talk to you, and I was totally right on the fact that you are an incredible mind, and you are very well read, and you know your stuff. And so it was really cool. And then fast forward about 2 or 3 years, and you've been just working behind the scenes doing your thing, started working at a dispensary. And then you had messaged me and said, hey, I got a great story for your podcast. It's, I work at this dispensary called the SpaceBuds, the dispensary. And we, the workers there, pushed to join a union. And so I'm doing a little two-part, 2-episode series on labor. My last interview was with Springfield City Councilor, who's the labor representative for the Teamsters. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, this is the perfect time. So Dakota, welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for having a place to also be like us to be more vocal and talk about a lot of labor rights and a lot of workers' rights, where you don't get a lot of opportunities to talk about.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot about this, and I purposely didn't do a ton of research. Now, there's a few posts on Reddit has been pretty popular. Mm-hmm. There was a big thread with a lot of comments, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go along. But tell me, first of all, you got into working in a dispensary. So, tell me what that was looking like, and tell me why you decided that you probably would need to form a union.
Yeah. So, I've just a little backstory for my experience in the industry. I've been here for about 5-6 years, going on 6 years in the fall. And I started working on a hemp farm out in 114-degree heat down in Southern Oregon. And about 3 years later, I was able and kind of wanted to make the jump to dispensary work when I moved up to Eugene, and kind of started seeing a different side of the industry. And I started at SpaceBuds about 1.5 years ago. And, it's great because you get to the difference between working on farms and working with the dispensaries. You get to interact with the customers, and you get to see a lot more of your community and the people that are using the weed, and you get to talk to them. And there's always been a little bit more of an educational side that I've kind of come at. So when I kind of jumped into the dispensary, it was a perfect fit. And so, a little bit about just the backstory of some of the reasons why we wanted to unionize and, workers' rights. There are things like unset scheduling, we have problems with wage stability and wage increases. We have problems with we had sick time problems that were filed through, we ended up having there were a few files through Bully, and there have been a bunch of other things that we brought up in our all of our union deliberations going at when we were in our deliberation with the owners, and it was kind of more just also talking about base respect of employees. There were a lot of employees who have been called straight up expendable at my store. And I know that this is also a common thing at other places. We all, as workers, no matter what you're doing now, you've definitely had a job where, you know that the owner just literally did not give a crap about you. You were just another person there and made to just work until, you kind of were done with it.
Right. And then they'd just replace you. Right.
Yep.
And I've worked at places before as a barber where I had, a micromanager where when I was I'd call in and I'd be like, look, I'm not feeling good, and she'd be like, well, what's going on? I'm like, well, that's not actually legal for you to actually ask me you don't get to determine, I had not to get too off the point, but I had a customer one time and I was talking to him about it because I was pretty frustrated. And maybe it's a little unprofessional, but the reality is I was that frustrated. So I was talking to my customer and I'm like, my boss is just like, I was sick. And she was like, well, what's the issue? So that way I can determine. And my boss was actually a doctor, or my customer was a doctor. And they're like, oh, so your barbershop employer is now practicing medicine. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Yep.
You know? And so, I mean, we're seeing a lot of this rise in employees just mobilizing and being like, I've had enough. And especially with your generation, I think a lot of times we separate each other into generations when we shouldn't, because there's probably a wide range of age group that works with your crew. I'm sure that it's a range, 10, 15 year difference. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, but it's not just 22. How old are you? 23?
I'm 23. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just young people, but you're finding you're not just an 18-year-old kid. Like you're a grown man, that's now working into, making this a career move. So now I've noticed that on Reddit, one of the criticisms about this whole process that we're going to talk about is that people are like, well, if that's how your employer treated you, why would I want to patronize that? Why would I want to buy my cannabis at this dispensary? What do you tell people that would be potential customers on why they should still support the business?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the things that I did. There was a person commenting on there that was representing the SpaceBuds page and was replying to those people being like, you should still come in and patron, and still be a patron. Even if you don't want to support that much, you can just drop in and buy a joint, or you can drop in and let us know that you support us while poking around. But never did, I have never advocated and never really thought that it would be really beneficial to boycott or not really support the store. And in the opposite, I told people, if you really just want to, you should come visit more to show support to the workers who are going through it right now. Because, however people want to think about an owner or whatever person they want to with their own personal opinions, they can form for themselves. All I'm here for is workers' rights, and all I'm here representing is the workers. So I just want us to, we get better, we get better, better community engagement, and we get better, reviews, and we get better, criticism on our work whenever we have more customers. So it's always, no matter what, I would say, just try and come in, and whether you choose to spend money or not, that's your call. But ever since we've won everything, and it's been certified, and we're in our bargaining unit, right now it's just the perfect time to come in and stop by.
Yeah. Regardless of what got you there, at this point, now you're supporting you by shopping there, because the money that's spent there pays your wage. So now let's talk about the process. You basically, I don't know a ton about this, so it's going to be easy. Assume that I don't know, because I don't. Just explain to me. You tell me the grievances, the reasons that you were like, look, this isn't going to fly. It's bad for our mental health. We need to come together. What does that process look like? How does somebody kind of organize it? Who is it? A group effort? Is it, an individual that pops up and starts kind of getting the megaphone? Just tell me what the process looks like when you're wanting to unionize.
Yeah. So, for us, for all people in particular, it always starts somewhere. It starts with, maybe your employer, like ours wasn't following COVID regulations, and there were employees that were made to work while having COVID. There were, obviously we talked about wage and scheduling, and just state laws not being followed, and having to fight to actually just get bare minimum, legal rights for workers. It always starts with, a worker not feeling as respected by their owner, and not getting the actual benefits of a job that they should be, which is something that's pretty important to every single person. So really, you just start by either, there are a few ways to unionize. You can join up with a pre-existing union that already has branches devoted. The benefits of that is just you have a lot more legal representation, because they already probably have lawyers that are on
payroll.
They're on their payroll, and that are also specified for that sector, and really certify their work in like maybe agricultural law or unionizing law or workers' rights and specific things. And then there's also, you can make your own union. Every single person. It's actually one of the things that's in our in our Constitution, I believe, is our right to unionize, and it's one of the only things in this country that is actually a guaranteed right, is your constitutional right and federal law, like federally protected right to unionize. And you can make your own union at your store, because all it is you would just go around, have like be like, this is the union representing, if we just did SpaceBuds, the dispensary, and tried to make our own union, like we would have done like SpaceBuds the union, and everyone would sign their like labor cards that we would have, like that would be certified by the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Bureau. They would have certain legal requirements that your cards would need to say, with like signatures, information about the employee, and like basically them signing off that they are interested in forming a union. You would, like, if you were already a part of a pre-existing union like UFCW, there were already cards that we got to every single employee. They got to sign, and we got handed back. And then for the NLRB to start, like actually to be filing for unionizing with your store, you have to reach a minimum requirement of 30% of the store having signed a card, which doesn't sound like a lot, but to win your vote, you have to have 50% of the vote plus one. And so the downside with like starting your own union and not really going through a lot of like more solidified areas are that, getting that, like, you'll submit maybe with 30% and you might lose your election because you don't have everyone yet, but you're just trying to file and hopefully bolster like confidence. In our case, we had to get 70% of our store on board before we could even file. So we had a large majority of the store wanting to unionize before we even actually got to vote. And all of those cards, also what they do is they protect you against retaliation, because if you are unionizing, so personally in my own case, like, you start unionizing, let's say you're the only one that wants to unionize, in my case, and you have to start convincing your whole store. I've kind of told people it's like playing the largest game of Survivor you've ever played, if you've ever watched Survivor, because you are actively hiding the fact that you have grievances and are trying to take grievances and talk to them about like workers' rights with your coworkers without your managers or your owner really noticing, because until you sign those cards and get them filed in with the NLRB, which can take a while, you don't really have any protection against being fired. Right. They can just walk in. I mean, in any place in Oregon, at-will employment exists unless you have a contract that specifies you don't. So they can just walk in and fire you. And they've done that I know Nectar has done that. Moss Crossing has also gone through and fired a lot of people who were starting to unionize, which a lot of these stores, like, we'll see places that are super, super like, oh, we're local, we're community owned. we're a hallmark of this community, and we represent our community. But the second that their workers are maybe just want to waste for themselves, they just let them loose, and they are not afraid to use any like rules.
Any means necessary. Exactly. And I would imagine behind the scenes, when you as an employer are trying to rise up and kind of motivate your crew to join on so that it can benefit them, there's fear because of what you're talking about. And then also it's a dog-eat-dog world. So when you work for an employer that you're not satisfied with, it's pretty common that employer is they're going to use each employee against each other. So they have their little teacher's pet kind of deal where they're like, who you want to throw under the bus today? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And so that would be a difficult task, I would imagine. Was there a lot of pushback or fear, like I'm talking about? Was there a lot was there some employees that were like, I don't know if I want to rock the boat. I'd rather just make
most people. It's interesting. So my unionizing effort started in about February of 2021, and we officially filed in January. So almost a whole year of unionizing, and the owner and every main people who I didn't want to know about it did not know until technically about a week after we filed. So we were able to get to the finish line because I was so secretive about every single thing. And it was actually interesting because of my secrecy and because of how little things changed over that year. You got to see a really sharp change in January, just in like treatment of employees and things going on. But for about a year, like I was trying to convince anyone and everyone. Like I started with people that were, less likely, obviously, to go straight to the owner and tell, and that's mainly because they were already complaining. I was talking to, so I already said, but I was speaking with a reporter from Willamette Weekly, and when we were talking, like I was basically saying, like every single person at that store had made very open grievances, and I'm someone who has worked in campaigns, and I've worked with DHS, and I've worked with LCC, and I've worked in a lot of like not just like legal areas of the industry, but also I've worked in a lot more, I would say, higher roles that have an HR department and have really a tighter grip on, worker respect. And every time I would just kind of be like, that's not some way a person should treat you. Like, even if we're just talking about the owner being your friend, because, everyone at the store, like we have a personal relationship with the owner. He was our friend. We hang out, like we talk. And that is one of the reasons why a lot of people are really hesitant about, unionizing, because they feel like they're betraying their friend and their owner and someone who's given to them. But when they're constantly being like, yeah, but then they do this thing, which is really terrible and set me back, and this thing, and they go off on their lists. I'm like, that's not some way an owner, like who doesn't even care about their employees. As a person who worked at Macy's, I was treated at least with more legal respect there than a small time like business, because they're able to also use that friend mentality to get away with more. And I know we all know friends that are like, oh, you're my friend, do things for me. Now we just have like an actual financial incentive to do those things and to actually kind of give away our friendship and kind of.
I just think that I just think it's so important that people understand, for A, their rights as a worker, and B, the channels to go through, on who they could contact if they're feeling like this needs to be something that they want to consider. So tell me the process. So who did you go to get this started? And then you joined an existing union at the UFCW Local 555. So did you reach out to them and ask for guidance? Is that kind of how that went?
So what I ended up doing was, because I've already worked in a lot of I worked on Prop 102 and 108, which in Oregon decriminalized all Schedule 1 narcotics in Oregon, and then also the kicker to that was also turning all nonviolent drug crimes into a capital, just a capital offense, just a really easy slap on the wrist, because the secret to that was a lot of people were going to get retried. And in campaigning with those two propositions, I actually heard about UFCW 555. They are the union that actually worked with OLCC to get medical and then recreational cannabis legalized in Oregon. So that's actually one of the biggest reasons why I know them. They've worked a lot with Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden and Kate Brown and a lot of people across the in all areas that are pushing for marijuana decriminalization and better financing laws and less corporatization and a lot better agricultural sense. So I was looking up unions because I was interested in possibly making my own, because as someone who has legal backing, I was actually drafting up my own contract and drafting up a lot of our own legal forms. Hideaway Bakery is a bakery over in Eugene down on Willamette, and they actually went through a similar thing about a year ago, where about half of their employees wrote a union and sent the draft to their owner, and the owner agreed to one of the 52 terms. And they didn't really have any legal backing or anything that was in there that was so solid. And that really made me want to look at something that was a little bit more established. and especially when one that had like legal backing, because I knew that when push comes to shove, everything goes to the courts. And you as a worker, if you make your own union, you're going to have to shell out for a lawyer, or you need to be able to go into that into court and represent yourself as well as a lawyer could, in terms of workers' rights and actual work state laws, and proving certain things that aren't being provided, which is really hard. It's like if you were trying to defend yourself in criminal court, especially when the owner has more money than you and is going to try and beat you in any ways possible. They might try and frame you for racism. They might try and get fake complaints filed against you so that they can also take you to possible court before they fire you. Wow. So that I ended up reaching out to UFCW and getting in contact with them and talking and learning a lot about their union before I even was yeah, we're going to do that. Because
go ahead.
No, you're I just wanted to make sure that all of our workers were really getting all of themselves represented. And I had been talking to all of them beforehand and wanted to know what UFCW did and what they offered as a union, from not just backing, in terms of legal, and actual litigation, but, resources they offered, insurance, their incentives through wage, actual steady wage increases that are set with the economy and other things.
So now once you have the vote and you join the union and you get the vote that you need to get the numbers, how long does it take to start seeing changes?
It takes a bit. So we filed on January 4th. We actually voted in March because you have to have, because of COVID, there's been it's only been mail-in voting. So you usually have about a month and a half to vote and everything. And once our stuff got in, it was March 4th that everything was finalized. That was when the last day could your votes could be in. And then during that time, it took a little bit longer. So typically you would see they would read off the votes, and that day your vote would be certified. But because your owner and the union itself, both sides can contest votes, because only certain people are allowed to vote in union elections. Supervisors are not allowed to vote technically. So there was a lot of argument about who were supervisors, because there's a lot of gray area at the store in terms of titles and what you actually do. So it took about a month for our victory to actually certified in court. But then in April, everything was certified, and that's when our bargaining unit started. So we sent surveys around. You said a union will send surveys around to every employee so that they can ask them what's the most important thing and aspect to you in your job? What would you like to see changed? Where are some there was free writing areas to give our own comments, opinions, any other things that we wanted to really work on, just what we cared about, if wages were more important to you, if scheduling was more important to you, and just listing examples of times at the store and times where you would like to see that implemented. And then they take all those surveys and basically draft a contract going of what's important, what they can give when they're arguing in court, because it is a deal. In the end, the contract's going to happen, but it has to be equal. We can't go in there being we demand $30 an hour, full dental, medical, vision, everything, because that's unsustainable for, people that, we get it. Not even really crazy, a lot of corporations can afford that, but, it is a smaller store.
Yeah, margins.
We have a second location, but it's not a store. But there is finances there. That is one of the things that's always argued against a lot of workers. Is they're we don't have the overhead, we don't have the finances. Yet, in SpaceBuds' case, I was told that my hours were cut in the end because of finances, and that we couldn't have me as a bud tender there because of certain aspects relating to that and sales. Yet, we got our UFO that's been there for 5 years. It just got redone, which cost a pretty penny, I bet, because of how intricate the artists are. We got a whole set design inside with lights and lighting display. The inside has changed. The outside, right in front of the store, in the entrance, has gotten a bunch new additions. There's been a bunch new updates in and outside of the store, which cost a lot of money.
Sure.
And that's possibly because there's a Netflix series, hopefully they're trying to develop at the store.
Oh, wow.
And so with all that, there's the talk about, okay, well, where this money could also be devoted towards, workers, when, certain workers have been working there for 5 years and are, the number one of the like top ranked and like managerial positions at the store, and they haven't been given a raise in years. And like when we talk about that, it's really important because no person should ever stop getting raises, because our economy is constantly going up.
It's constantly
and we're
evolving.
yeah, if I'm making the same amount of money I am right now as I made back in 2018, when I was like in my second year and doing farming, and I'm technically making less than I did then, because every year you could probably shave off about 15 to 25 cents of your pay, like what you're getting paid, and that's basically what inflation is doing to your dollar.
Right. So now I want to talk about basically my next question is how is it enforced? I mean, there's a collective bargaining agreement. Is that correct? So you basically have, and this is what it is. You get the union, and in your case, the UFCW Local 555, you have a representative that is well-versed on these kind of things, that sits down with the employer and negotiates this. Is that correct? I mean, there's a certain time period that the collective bargaining agreement happens. So, the question I asked before was, how long did it take to start seeing changes? But then once you started seeing the changes, when it's implemented, how does that work? I mean, basically that's it, right? The representative, you can explain it better.
Yeah. So yeah, we're in the midst of seeing the changes. They start happening as the bargaining unit is made, because you start seeing changes immediately as soon as lawyers' eyes are on the store, because that's when you're going to see all the small little like legal things that they're like, well, technically illegal things that they're kind of getting away with completely change. Like, tracking sick time better, actually implementing that, actually giving you sick time when you request it. A lot of things that they'll try and get away with before, they will just immediately start changing. And people, in the past couple months, like they're like, my treatment has gotten a little bit better. And I'm just like, why do you think? I spent about a year telling everyone, I'm like, hey, remember how he treats you right now? Because as soon as we file, everything is going to change. And there are a few individuals who I told that, and they're like, oh, definitely. And then as soon as things started to change, they're like, wow, I can't believe it. Yeah, actually, maybe there's like a new leaf. And I'm like, are you serious? Like,
yeah, this is how this works.
Yep. And so you see change really slowly, especially until the bargaining unit and contract gets solidified. That's really just when you start seeing more state, like we're just running like what's legally required now. But once the contract gets solidified, and it's actually signed on both parties and it's implemented, that's when you actually start seeing the wage changes. That's when you see the scheduling changes and everything that's required.
Well, and I wonder, I mean, there's a lot of pushback, I know with Amazon, when Amazon was trying to unionize the workers, there's a lot of lobbying power from a huge corporation like that. But from a smaller business, like a local business, I know that because I work in a locally owned barbershop that has independent contractor employees. The benefit of being an independent contractor, not an employee, is that we can set our prices. So with inflation, we can raise it. So we don't have to lobby as much, because we can just kind of go with it, and it goes with the market. But that being so, I do know though how expensive it is to run a local business, and the regulations and the state constantly wanting a cut and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that I think that is a benefit to this, to the employer, is that it sets a guideline of what expectations are. Because just to be a business owner, you don't have to be have a business degree. You don't have to understand the inner workings of every little element. You probably should, but that's not a given. You know what I mean? And especially, I mean, you hear this a lot with restaurants. You'll have and like immigrant owned restaurants, for example, which I think is amazing and is an important part of our culture, but it's notoriously a known thing that like sometimes they're like, that doesn't work at this shop. And it's like, no, that's the law. Like this is our laws, and there's protections. And I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus. I'm just saying it happens, and it's a common thread.
It's actually interesting you brought that up, because like I was actually I was talking about that reporter. That was actually that was a thing they exactly brought up, was like, smaller people like owning those things, especially with immigrant workers and stuff. And like I am actually, my aunt and uncle, like my abuela down in my tia and tío, they're like down in Southern California, and they own a restaurant and deal with all those things. And I actually talk about workers' rights with them because, you know, there is the whole problem of like, how much are you paying everyone? Are you giving consistent raises? Is it something that's livable? And, you know, it is always the argument of like, you know, there's this, you know, we have less money and we have to, you know, there are a lot of tighter expenses. And that's typically where I tell people, okay, then, you know, I kind of pull out the joke board that Walmart gave to a lot of its employees, where they're like, oh, instead of us giving you raises, maybe we'll give you a budget and then just exclude like food from the budget and random things that are important. And me being like, maybe I should give you a budget plan. Maybe you shouldn't be as, you know, because in America, this is the kind of the business model. People want to grow their business. And they want rapid expansion. That means they're going to try and reach out really quickly, and they're going to try and branch out and start to envelop new areas. And, you know, with that, you have to get more employees. And that means your expenses are going towards those employees. And then also all the things you kind of stretched yourself too thin to even acquire. So you start subsidizing your employees so that you can do more frivolous things. You pay your people less so that you can buy a new location, so that you can, you know, expand, build this part so that you can maybe have a Netflix series or something like that.
Right.
So in those areas, and this is when we start actually talking about even as regular business models, the moment you have to subsidize your employees to make a profit and better your business, you've failed. You have failed your business, and you technically are going to be on a downward spiral of either having to hire less competent and less educated employees and constantly having to hire new employees every year and a half, because people expect wage raises and expect a certain level of like minimum requirements from their job, and they're not going to be seeing that. Or you're going to go the route of actually, you know, hiring career-long people, but then you have to give them those wages and you can't expand as fast. And that's kind of the bubble that, I mean, there's an economist professor, and Dr. Richard Wolff. He was a Harvard professor. He is a professor of economics, and he talks a lot about like he does talk about how capitalism is a failed business model and a failed model in general. It's not just about, you know, free markets and like things like that. That's actually, free markets are open in every single ideology basically, but specifically talking about failed business models and how we've kind of had to revert to an area where we are kind of like feudal serfs in terms of how minimum we're getting paid and how much we're working, and not getting really that equal off, because since the Gilded Age, we've kind of given all these people in America this, you know, side hustle 5 to 9 mentality, where like you can build your own business, you can go do your own thing, and then you can live off your business. And once you start hiring people, you know, since you created that business, you can like decide how much you want to pay them. But every person, if you can make a thriving livelihood off of your business by owning it and working it, then you should be able to like pay that to your employees, or you're not at the level that you need to be to actually have a functional business that is the size you want.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I do know, I see both sides, not to employees being treated unfairly. I mean, the reality is if you can't afford to have an employee, you can't have an employee. It's just the way it goes. You know, my dad owns a print shop, and it was maybe 3-4 employees max. Mm-hmm. And he's somebody that I admire because he is very conservative, but he has ethics in business. So he's told me numerous times, he's like, I only hire, I mean, this may not be legal. He only would hire students because it's in a college town. Yep. That he could give part-time, because he's like, if I give you part-time, I have to give you health insurance. And I'm not saying that like I don't want to, I'm saying like that's the just thing to do. That's the just thing to do. So he gets people that are the 6-8 hours a week that you're talking about, but he's not lying to anyone about it. He tells them, this is the expectation when you get hired. This is all I'm going to be able to offer. It's going to be a side gig to accent some of the extra help that I need so that I can continue to grow. And then he does all the work himself. You know, and
that's a difference. That's like that's a small amount of employees and using them to fill in the extra work he can't do, versus having full-time, technically never having full-time employees, because if you keep them right under 37 hours and you don't have to go into any of the benefits, and having them run your store, never opening your store once, and having an employee work more days than you worked and more holidays than you worked in a year, that means you're not really working at your store as much. And if you're if you're trying to cut them down and constantly keep them away from something and have openly expressed negative thoughts about employees and workers in America, it's kind of evident to the people around you. A lot of our workers were always hearing that we have been told that we were expendable. And one of the things that went around, it's not even hidden. Every employee gets our memos. In a lot of our memos, we always were told in bold writing, remember, this is a really cool job. And hundreds of people are always applying. So kind of be happy that you have a job. And, it might sound mean to say, but that was told to us. And as a person who I'll say it, I'm probably in that area, I have a lot of education and I know, and I respect myself and my information and everything. I was like, there is no way I would ever let someone like that talk to me. I would never let anyone talk to me like that, especially my coworkers. I'm not going to let anyone talk to other people like that around me, because that means that you just view us as expendable. And I talk about the business model of cannabis workers in college towns, because it's interesting you brought that up. You actually see that in college towns and really large population towns, there is higher rates of retail cannabis business, but less farming, and less farming in the general rural area around that. But as soon as you start getting way out into the boonies, there's a huge amount of farming. And it's because in retail, the cannabis dispensary is becoming a lot more retail. When I first entered into this industry, I was getting paid $25 to $20 an hour as a trimmer. And that was because it was based off of your quality of speed. And when I was looking at dispensary jobs, they were paying $17, $18 an hour just for bud tenders. It has crashed down to 11. Well, now it's minimum. It was when I was started into it, minimum was $11. So it was $11, $12 an hour for a bud tender, which is a huge drop off. And cannabis prices have technically, they've been on an all-time high, because ever since 2018, hemp was federally legalized. So everyone in their mother grew hemp, because it's $2,200 for a single hemp plant versus and you don't have to do anything. You just throw that bitch out there and it'll grow. Wow. Versus cannabis and using selling for THC and everything, you need to cure it. You need to really manicure and put a lot of labor into it. Just to make sure that you can sell it, and then anything can go wrong and ruin it. And even then, you're getting about, I think it was the going price was about $100 per percent of THC for a pound. Wow. Which is a lot. And you have to grow really well and consistent and put a lot of money in to get the payoff. So as prices, for an ounce back then, it was $40 in 2017 for a good ounce. Now, for 28 grams of the same product, it's around $260 to $300, which is an insane markup. And you are seeing that price increase amongst farms are having to put more nutrients and stuff and pay taxes and certain things. But you actually are seeing a higher profit margin just across the board, because although, you're having higher expenses, this weed is selling so expensively and you're making a higher profit margin. So we've seen that change, but we've actually seen a reduction in payment for workers. Right. I went from making $25 an hour as a trimmer to $13 an hour as a trimmer in this course of literally 2 years. And as a bud tender, it kind of crashed down from 18 to 12, and now has kind of worked its way up from minimum to $14 an hour, 15 an hour. And it's kind of ridiculous with the amount of experience we have to have. And, there are definitely bad bud tenders out there who are uneducated. And that's actually what this business model is about. College dispensaries, what they do is they always have incoming 21-year-olds. They're always going to have a 21-year-old who wants a weed job, who is probably just there for college and is going to be gone by the summer, or maybe lives there for 2 years. And will quit after a certain amount of time. So they'll constantly have an influx of new people that can work, that could be decent. And so they're constantly paying them bare minimum, and really they don't need a huge amount of experience. And then after about a year, either they hit the road themselves, or they kind of get wise and are like, why am I not being treated better? Oh, I graduated. I need more money. I'm working here more. I'm giving more of my power and my effort to this store. Why am I not getting a payoff? They can just kick them to the curb and then hire this new person that's coming in, because they have that constant surge from college towns. And it's kind of why I've talked about why this business model works so well in college towns, because you're constantly getting that
because you have
influx.
Exactly. Now, just a question I have about being a bud tender: is it still true that you can't get a paycheck? It has to be cash, or you?
It is all cash.
It is all cash, because
you get a pay stub.
So I don't know if people understand this, because it's not federally recognized as of right now.
Mm-hmm.
That you cannot have. It's not FDIC protected. So your paycheck is not digital. You can't get direct deposit or anything like that, which means that you then have to pay for your bank account, because in order to get a free bank account, unless you use a credit union, which you should anyone should use a credit union. But you have to pay for your monthly
Shout
bank
out Selco.
Selco. I had an episode on my podcast with On Point Community Credit at the beginning of the year. Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely am all pro credit union. But I just that's crazy. You can't, I understand it, and at any time, we could change. We have a change in leadership and a change in attorney general, and they could get their jollies off by raiding dispensaries in Oregon. So we'll see what the future holds, because don't count it out, people. Donald Trump is probably going to be the president again.
Yeah, honestly, the Democrats are throwing it, and if Biden ran again, he would definitely. This is just this is personal. Biden ran again, he would lose to Trump, especially because he could throw it in. But Bernie did say that he would run in 2024, possibly.
We'll see. I'm a dreamer. Yeah, me too. And we'll see. I mean, I don't want to get too off track. I mean, I guess we're wrapping up. We could talk a little bit about some politics. I love talking to you, because I learn a lot.
Before we wrap up, you were talking about the FDIC thing and just like tanking. That's another thing that actually happens in the industry. So happened at our store. A lot of our employees were getting gypped out of their money, because you're getting paid in cash, and we got pay stubs. Some people get pay stubs, some people don't. It really depends on how your owner operates. But we were doing our hours and calculating, and there were dozens of times many employees were missing a large amount of money from paychecks, and it was proven through pay stubs and hour calculations that pay stubs were actually wrong. And so that is actually an interesting point that you did bring up, that it until we get this actually federally just decriminalized, just to start, even workers are really, really let loose. There are people that aren't so when I was cut for my hours and went on food stamps and benefits, you actually have, when you're applying, there is weird regulations for cannabis workers, because it's not federally legalized. It's only state legalized. And so there's only a lot of there's a certain amount of benefits and things you can get and things they can give in terms of their funding, because they get funding from the nation. And there's even in there, I've talked to multiple DHS agents who have given conflicting reports about if cannabis workers can actually get food stamps. And I've been flat out denied, being cannabis isn't a recognized form of labor in the eyes of the DHS. But
you were expected to pay federal taxes.
Yes.
Of course. It's a Wild West, and it's so funny how that works. They're like, what you're doing is illegal, but we want you to pay federal taxes.
You have to be a W-4 so that we can get all the money we want from you.
And no protections. So essentially that's taxation without representation at that point. Yeah. So on the federal level. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I'd like to have you back on talking maybe less about the unions and more about just what it is to be a dispensary worker. Yeah. I'm excited to hear that you're doing this. First of all, for you personally, the fact that you have done this. Now I say this all the time to young people. Once you accomplish things, then you can accomplish the next thing. Yeah. That's why high school graduation is so important. You know what I'm saying? It's like finishing something that wasn't enjoyable. That was, you know what I mean? That you're like, I put my mind to it though, and I pushed through.
Yeah, it took a long time to push this through.
And it's amazing, and it's something I'm sure you're extremely proud of. And I'm sure that there's been repercussions and pros and cons. And union is not all union good. non-union bad. It doesn't work like that. There's pros and cons. There's definitely issues that come with unions, because they're just like everything else as they grow. I talked about it last week that they sometimes get farther away from the actual worker.
Yeah.
But that's a whole, we could talk forever. I'm not sitting here and saying that they're not without flaws.
Yeah,
but
there's like the list of things that your owner would say to you, like, oh, labor, like, you're going to pay union dues, which like that was a big thing for ours. And I was like, yeah, it's literally less than a Netflix subscription per month. And you're going to be making more. So that's going to be paid. There's a lot of those
I'll just buy one less blunt. Yeah. From but no, I mean, there's just a lot. I'd like to cover more stuff on labor because again, as an independent contractor, I don't know a ton about this. And it's something I'm learning a lot from people like yourself. But Dakota Licea, I appreciate you so much for doing this. If anybody wants to come and sample your goods that you sell at the SpaceBuds dispensary, where can they find you?
Yeah, at 741 Lincoln Street. You can visit us. We are open 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Sundays. And yeah, we have deals every day of the week. Honestly, like, I think the best thing that I love about our dispensary is you can come in and it's like, we call ourselves like a pharmacy kind of for weed. Like, you can really, we do clinical research, and you can go on our website, SpaceBuds@dispensary.com, where, yours truly did a lot of that research themselves, and a lot of we have research on, if you from people on the spectrum and using weed medically, the epilepsy, to actual SSRI use, if you use weed for mental health benefits. There's a lot of stuff. So I would definitely check everything out on the website and definitely come in and just give us a hoop and holler and kind of support us.
Yeah. So now, assuming that your employer will watch this or listen to this, what has your relationship been after this whole process with them? I mean, I would think that if you look someone eye to eye, adult to adult, I'm not going to say man to man, it's 2022, adult to adult, you're like, this is what I expect. And that person's like, okay, well, I can give you this. And there's concessions. I mean, as human beings, we need to be able to just demand respect and whatnot. How has the relationship been since? Has it improved actually?
So my relationship with the owner, we were really, if you asked him, we would say we were friends up until January. We were at the store. We would talk a lot. He was inviting me on to be on the podcast, do a lot of website creation. I was being promoted to intake manager as of January. And then after everything dropped, I became a really bad employee and all these things. Our relationship really fell off when he decided to cut my hours, because I came into this job full time, and I've always been full time. And I live paycheck to paycheck like most millennials and most people in this country. And I have bills, and I am a student, and have loans that I am previously paying off for other colleges, for other degrees that I have and certifications. And when I had my hours cut, I went and straight appealed. And, there's always the whole, we have an open door policy, but the open door has a bucket of water right on top of it. So as soon as you open that door, you just fucking get drenched and fired. Yeah. And so when I went to talk about it, I told him very seriously, I'm like, you're cutting me down from, at that point, it was 36 hours to less than 12 hours a week. And I was like, I tried to argue, and I was like, hey man, I'm like, why? And this was when he went through 3 different, arguments, being at first he was saying that it wasn't me specifically that was being targeted. And then I pulled up a whiteboard and was like, so here's all my hours, and all of them are gone and given to another person, where everyone else's hours are completely the same. And he's like, okay, I am targeting you, but it's because you're not reliable. And I was like, interesting. Flip the whiteboard around. I'm like, here's inputs and quotes from every single manager and employee I've talked to saying that I'm actually really reliable. And then it kind of went to, we don't have sales and volumes and finances to really keep that going for you to be full time. And that's when I was like, you're putting me at very, very, it was a lot to just kind of be like, hey, with that, you're putting me at risk of being homeless and my food security. I will possibly lose my home, and I will possibly actually end up having to go way, way, way deeper into debt, something that I might not ever be able to pull myself out of. And he shrugged at me. And so that's when I tell people about the disconnect between owners and workers and people that are have a little bit more settled in their life versus people who are trying to just either dig themselves out of a hole or establish themselves, there's supposed to be respect just in normal people. And that was the moment that really, when I went full force to like unionizing and went complete, like realized that the relationship was never there. There was never respect there, because you couldn't, if you were knowingly going to make someone homeless just because personal retaliation, like there was no actual reason my hours were cut and they were just given to another person immediately. Right. And there is no reason I'm not there full time just because he doesn't want me to. It does take a level of not caring and inhumanity. It does, there are very few things in this world that like morally define you. And I think that there are moments in people's lives that do define them. And I have told him this, and it's very open. There is nothing ever that was disrespectful. You're on a public forum, sure. Nothing that was ever disrespectful. I actually had the utmost respect and was trying to be as respectful as I could. Went through everything legally and everything completely well. And I was just treated inhumanely, and that's when I realized that I was, it didn't really matter if I ever had a perception of what my relationship was to him, because my relationship at any time was just contingent on me being a worker who didn't question anything.
Yeah. Well, keep fighting the good fight, because it sounds like, I have a ton of respect for you because for standing up for yourself. We're going to get out of here. But before I do, I want to say, if you want to donate to the podcast, you can go to Venmo at Spent the Rent. You can also go to STRPOD.com. And then there's a sponsors tab that you can donate through PayPal or Patreon. If you'd like to become an executive producer on Patreon, there's 3 different levels, but the executive producer is the highest one. And that gives more access behind the scenes, where we would have a monthly meeting with my executive producers that they could tell me some stories that they'd like to see spotlighted and that kind of stuff. So go to STRPod.com to find out more about that, or just donate, drop a $5 digital tip cup, whatever, donation to Venmo at Spent the Rent. So Dakota Licea, thank you so much. SpaceBuds, the dispensary. I do kind of, after what you've told me today, I do kind of have the similar feeling of some of the people on Reddit, where I'm like, I don't know if I want to shop there. So hopefully this is a new thing. You said that it happened in March. We're in May. That, I do feel like this process will improve as it becomes the law of the land, or was, so to speak, where this is, like I said, the expectations for the employer are set out and defined. Once that becomes common practice, I would hope that things will improve a lot, even with the morale, because hurt feelings fade, and so there's a lot of emotion on both sides, I'm sure. And so it is what it is. But obviously, make sure to give a shout out to UFCW. If you guys are if anyone is trying to, unionize your store, or trying to in any, whether you're a cannabis dispensary or any regular store, anything, or service in the service industry, reach out to your local union rep and try and get in contact, because it's a lot simpler and a lot easier than you think. Yeah. And I think that's super important for people to know, because they need to know their options. They need to know their rights.
Yeah.
So Dakota Licea, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, man.